What up? Good evening.
Yo, good evening.
It's this BMG here with Chad this evening. Travis is, on mission, doing his thing, spreading love the veteran way. So we're gonna do a little fish version of the event tonight. And so Chad and I were just reminiscing about our times before in the back room there. Speaking of some fun times that we've had, in the service and out. And
Blessed.
Chad, we met. I believe you came right from boot camp to go deploy with us, didn't you?
I did. I got out in June and I left with you guys in July.
Yep. So Chad was one of there's like 7 of you guys that all like showed up at once.
Yeah, actually, Jack and Doya and Wilson and all those guys called over to the 211th when I was with the 211th because I went from the 211 to the 747 because they didn't have room for all of us. And they had called me into the first sergeant's office. Jack was on the phone with Mikey talking to the first sergeant. So that's how I thought I was in trouble. I just got there. That was funny.
Yeah. So yeah, we I remember they called everybody up. They got you guys all there, and then the first time I think we interacted was it on the bus that day that I got mad at you guys because Jack was waiting for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So our first interaction, we didn't hit it off.
I forgot about that.
And
You
so
got good memory.
yeah, so Jack was waiting on you guys, and I was like, "Come on, troop, keep going." I was like, we got to get to this, training or whatever. And he was waiting behind, and like, I didn't understand at the time that he was, waiting on you guys, his buddies, and he's just waiting there. And the kid's like telling me no, and I'm like, wait a second, why are you saying no? Sure enough, I met him, and then I had to go meet Jack's team leader later on that day and explain why I had to give his troop some corrective action.
Yeah. Hey, well deserved though, right?
Absolutely. And then months later, Jack's hanging out in the Chew in Iraq, telling BMG what's going on in life.
I know.
It's just
Well,
wild how pre-deployment, one thing, this guy's a hard ass. He's a jackass. What the hell? And then a few months later, down range, rank, kind of blurs a little bit, and you understand who the person is behind that.
yeah, that's the truth. I met a lot of people and vice versa, it seemed like everything was kosher and then you get in the country and it's like, hey, is that pee in your pants? What's going on here? But we figured it out. You always had our back, that's for sure.
Absolutely. And even the toughest soldier that that gave you the hardest time, you grow to love and you grow to understand them as the deployment goes on. And it's really funny that the people that you think you're gonna be the best friends with at the beginning of the tour may not be the same person that by the end of the tour that you've connected with the most.
Yeah, agree.
And it was just always just it was always wild to me to see like the interaction, things like that, and like and to see too like how like when you get soldiers that come from other units to volunteer to go on tour with guys, like how they're outsiders at first, and and then they slowly blend in with the unit.
Yeah, and then you understand why, if you got something good, you try to protect it. Sometimes it comes off not very nice, but once you figure out, okay, these people are serious for this reason, you understand it. That was one of the hardest things for me uh, to learn is when to shut it off, as you know, and when not. I mean, I can't count how many times I'd do something and you'd be like, Jaramillo, you didn't see that there was a first sergeant over there? Now I got to take you over here and smoke you like I can't stand you. And then we'd be having just same type of conversations, except I'd be getting smoked. But once you figure it out, you learn and grow, figure it out. It's the
Absolutely. And,
best parts of the military.
it is. It's it really does. It's awesome to see how you grow and bond with people. And like my gunner from the second tour, told me that we went out to that little fake fob in Fort Dix, to do the same thing to do the training and do like all the qualification things. And so when we went out there, we were going out there for 30 days. This kid left his sneakers back in the barracks. He packed everything else, but he didn't pack his sneakers. And I was like, did you packed your PTs? You packed your your pants, your shorts, your shirt. Did you just think you were gonna wear boots everywhere? Like, and so then I had to secure us a vehicle. I got us a vehicle so we could go back to the barracks, pick up his shoes before anybody found out, and then get back to the fake fob. And then I'm like, all right, buddy. I'm like, grab your canteen, grab your Camelback. We went over to like the little rubber pit, and I'm like, I'm gonna smoke you. I'm gonna do everything with you, but you gotta learn your lesson here, kid.
Yeah, and one thing I'm grateful for is there's a lot of leaders in the military, and you have to respect all of them. I get it. But I will say some of my best teachers came from what I didn't want to be like. There were a few like you and Wisniewski. I really liked him. He was a really good dude to me. I got nothing but respect for that guy. And many others, but some of the stuff that sergeants that I ran into is like, I learned what not to be like, and what characteristics that I wanted to have as a leader.
Absolutely. I mean, there was a lot of turds in the punch bowl.
Yeah, that's the way it goes though. If you don't have something bad, what not to be like, how do you know what to be like? Like you got to see both sides of the scale, and we always made it work with whatever we had. So, being resilient is huge, huge, huge.
Absolutely. And, one of the big things too is making the calls and checking up on folks. And I enjoy, if it's 3 a.m, my time, all of a sudden it's midnight your time, getting a text that just says, hey girl, how you doing? Miss you, things like that, just sending, a little message, letting people know that, they're thought of and, they're missed, can go a lot for people.
Yeah, one thing that I try to do, and I'm not the best at it, by any means, but on Mondays I try to just send out a text to, people I'm thinking about, or people I haven't heard from, and even people that I do, every day hear from. I just try to send them a message, hey, happy Monday, hope all is well, I love you, I'm thinking of you, and what comes of it, who knows? Maybe a video call, you know what I mean? Maybe this, maybe that, but there are people out there that care, It's just the whole asking for help part that seems to be a struggle in everybody's life, not just in the military career.
And and there's nothing to be ashamed of. You look at it like we were talking before in the green room. I helped you take care of the dog for a little bit when you needed me to watch him to dog sit. And I didn't think of it as any big thing, and then later on, when I needed a place to crash, you had a spot for me to, we're like, here's a room and a futon, crash as you need, man. So it's like, I didn't do the dog sitting and, thinking later in life, I need to return a favor. We just did things, to help one another. And, and we weren't afraid, like when we got in a tough situation to say, hey man, what can I do here? And, you got people that you can lean on, when you're a person that goes out there and does things for others, there's those people that are willing to help you too. Don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah, and one thing I'd like to touch on is just that, a lot of the times we have this certain idea of what we are, or, some people call it an ego, right? Like, Never in my life, looking back now, have I been like feeding that ego was a good thing. I try to be humble in everything that I do, but I also understand that when I do feed the ego, it's hard to reach for help, right? Like as men, especially in the military too, it's like, we'll figure it out. Hey, we'll figure it out. Hey, we'll figure it out. And sometimes it's you just can't figure it out. It's just that simple. Doesn't mean you're broken, doesn't mean you're less than, it doesn't mean anything. But I think a lot of times we beat ourselves up over things and we're like, no, I'm a man, I'm this, I'm that. Before you are a man, you're a human. And we're all human.
Yeah.
We all feel, we get sad, we get happy, we get mad, we get lost, we get depressed. Some feel other emotions more extreme than others, and I can understand both sides of those. Um, but it wasn't until like I asked for help. I went and got help on my own. Like, okay, did that help come from a friend of a friend that said, "Hey, look, this might be a good spot for you"? Absolutely. But it was that initial phone call that essentially changed my life forever. To be able to call, Jesse Butts, to be able to call Corey Silver, to be able to call these people and say, "Hey, this is how I'm feeling. What do you think about that?" I'm just being honest, you know, and not feeding that ego. And when the phone call comes in and somebody says, "Hey, how's everything going?" For me to not be saying, "Oh, everything's going great. It's beautiful. It's wonderful," when I'm falling apart. And on the flip side of that coin, it's like when you put that ego aside and you just do the next right thing for yourself, for you essentially get to bring the best version of yourself to the table with anyone that you want to sit with. And like I said, the flip side of that coin is being able to say, "Hey, look, if you need help, ask for help, because I've asked for help and I've received it, whether it's through the VA, whether it's through a friend, whether it's through God, whether it's through whatever it is that you believe in." Just asking for help is 90% of the battle.
Absolutely. And
You know,
you don't, when people ask how you're doing, you don't just automatically have to answer fine.
living the dream. That's what everybody says. Living the dream.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got to be honest and put that ego aside and say, "Hey, things aren't so well. I've been fighting with my kids, or I've been really irritated lately. I've been emotional lately. I'm feeling depressed. I feel like I'm drinking too much. I feel, and as a friend and as a buddy, and as part of the Helpish Haven, it's like you got to be there for each other.
Absolutely. And the biggest thing is when you confide into somebody like that you've served with, you do have that that ability to talk and speak freely and know that whatever you say and whatever you share is in confidence. I know some friendships that you have at work and things like that. You got gossip that goes around and passes around the workplace so quick, and they're very superficial relationships. But I feel like your veteran friends, it's a little bit deeper than that. You've shared in the suck, and that bond endures.
Always, always. And um, it doesn't matter if I've heard from you in the last 10 years, well, the next 10 days, the next 10 hours. It's always going to be the same response. I'm going to be one, I'm going to be truthful with you, and I'm going to be loving. I'm going to accept whatever it is that you say with love and understanding, because chances are I've been in a similar situation. Hey, my drinking's gotten out of control. I haven't had a drink in 6 years. And so just being able to ask for that help and being able to do that and have friends that are in the service, you're already one up. Like we spoke about earlier, it's easy um, to get into a negative mindset and also call somebody who is also in a negative mindset And then you're reconfirming, hey, yeah, we're both right. Things suck and they're never going to change and this, that, and the third. And you, but on the flip side of the coin, again, like we say, you can also call somebody with a positive mindset and say, hey, look, this is happening, that's happening. I just want to let you know I love you, whatever, whatever. And then we can talk about positive stuff. You know, it doesn't all have to be, hey, my life sucks, or hey, this is happening, or hey, I get it. But number one, you woke up this morning, so you're already on the winning side of the coin. Even if you woke up thinking to yourself, which I have many times, oh my God, are you kidding me? I woke up again. This is crazy. You know, and then I went right, back into the insanity of, what's caused from war and this, that, and the third, and life and traumas or whatever you want to call it. But at the end of the day, the chances are we've all been in some sort of pain. We've all been in some sort of sadness, but we've also been happy. We've also been grateful.
And the big thing too is, when when soldiers come to me with a problem, you don't just come to me with a problem. You come to me with a problem and you come with a solution. Don't just say things are fucked up. Don't just say things are shitty. Don't just say things are bad. They're only gonna get worse. Come with me with the way that we can improve it together. Come with the way that we can work this out. Like, hey, you want to go for a hike? Hey, you want to go for a car ride? Just free your mind for a little bit. And don't think anything. You can lay in the passenger seat. I'll cruise around. We'll listen to some tunes. Anything to get you out of your funk and your headspace. Jump online, play some video games. And any of these things. To reconnect outside of whatever is troubling you. It's just it's such a big thing, and why the Haven pushes recreation events to rebuild the camaraderie and to give veterans an outlet to talk to another veteran, to reach out and do that, because like you said, as men, how many friends have you made as life goes on, as you get older and older, it's less and less. So if you go out, have an event where you're getting together with guys that have also served, and your kids are both playing Mario Kart on the Switch, and you guys having a coffee and shooting the shit, and you guys are able to realize, hey, I'm dealing with home loan issues, or I'm dealing with ex-wife and child support or whatever. You guys can share the stress and whatever you guys are going through, and realize you don't have to deal with it alone.
Yeah, agreed. It's very important. And what a gift, to be able to have that. And if you don't, you have the health to share it. So
absolutely. And it's always good to when you reconnect with somebody, you've got so many like stories that we can fall back on. I know for you and I, like, we've got endless tales of the shenanigans that we were into, and all the nonsense.
yeah.
The big one we shared tonight was the up at Fort Drum. We were up there doing, was it an AT or was it just like
I think it was cold. We were doing some cold weather training before we went to NTC.
Yep. So we're up in Fort Drum. We set up the tents. We got everything going. We've got the MP platoon. We're our own organic platoon, and then we've got like we're attached in a BSTB. So if people don't know, it's a Special Troops Battalion. So it's the MP platoon is the only organic platoon in the company. Everybody else is like sections and like staff and like a bunch of officers, a bunch of admin people, all the people that you need to be able to function, but all the people that aren't typically going out in the field and being in and knowing what's going on. So it was the first night or the second night that we had this incident.
Second night.
The second night. So we're all out in the tents, everybody's sleeping out there, enjoying, Fort Drum and its loveliness. And, Fort Drum's up there by the Canadian border, you've got wildlife, you got everything out there.
Yep.
All of a sudden, we hear a scream at the night, and Sergeant Gary, there's a bear outside the tent.
There's a bear outside my tent.
And I just get closer. I can hear it. It's breathing.
Yeah, that's what he said. I can hear it breathing.
And the kid's screaming, and it's like, what am I supposed to do? I'm like, All right. And then all of a sudden, out jumps Chad, bursts out of the tent. He's in his boxers. He's got his boots on, and he's got a Kevlar in his hand, like he's gonna smash the bear with a Kevlar. He comes out. He's like, "Where is it? Where's that bear? I'm gonna get him."
Turns out it was just a branch rubbing on his tent.
Yeah, the whole time it's just the wind blowing and.
That was crazy. That's epic, man. That's so
The
epic.
best part though was like the kid that did that. Like, I wound up being in the Warrior Transition Unit after that tour with him, and like it was me, him, and 3 or 4 other soldiers from that battalion, and we were there, just sharing what was going on, and I was like, "Wait a second, were you the bear kid?"
Well, I didn't know that. That's funny.
Yeah, and he wound up, he needed a surgery. He's got a surgery, and he was able to continue serving. He's actually a corrections officer in New York State.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so
You still talk to him?
I do here and there. We shoot messages online.
Yeah, tell him I said hi next time you talk to him.
We'll do, and it's just it's funny because like in that Warrior Transition Unit, like you're supposed to be there to get healed up and either return to your unit, be separated from the service, or be retired. Those are the 3 things that are supposed to be. You're not supposed to be in charge of other troops. You're not supposed to be doing other things. But while I was there, like I couldn't just shut off being an NCO. Like so, like there was like 4 guys that were from our battalion, and me being the E7 and them all being E4s, it was like trying to take care of them and make sure everything was good. Like while we were there was time to do stuff, and like they had like Soldier of the Month boards where these guys could go and they could get promotion points and they could get awards and things like that. So like I started sponsoring the guys to be able to do that, like because you need an NCO to sponsor you to go to the board. And so the first time we had one of these, I didn't have my dress uniform, so I had to literally on Friday night drive all the ways back from New Jersey to Massachusetts. On Saturday, drive all the ways back to New Jersey from Massachusetts. And then on Sunday morning, we had the board. And out of the 5 soldiers and the 5 NCOs, I was the only other NCO that was in dress uniform with their soldier. All the other NCOs showed up in their ACUs. And I was like, what are you guys doing? Like, your soldier is there and you're presenting your soldier. You need to look as your soldier does. And it's like, it was just wild to see that these guys didn't understand that and do that. And the master sergeant of the medical unit that we were attached to it there wound up coining me because he was like, he's like, you literally drove to Massachusetts, turned around and drove back to make sure that your soldier was able to present himself the best to this board, and and it reflected well upon him. What you did here.
Right on. That's funny.
Like, and it was good to be able to do that with those guys, and like and being down there, like you had guys that would have surgery, and then nobody would check on them for 2 or 3 days, and it was like I felt like the need to be like go in, make sure they're eating, make sure they're doing well, make sure that they're not overdosing on their meds. Like when you're in a medical unit, you got guys that are on all sorts of crazy shit.
Oh yeah. Hey, and all sorts of crazy shit happens, but at the end of the day, you gotta be there for each other.
And one thing I see that nowadays they have is like on X, on Twitter, they've got hots and cots. I don't know if you've seen it. Like they post about like the shit that's going on with like defects, things that are going on in the barracks, things that are fucked up in soldiers' lives, and like they're putting a spotlight on it to make sure it gets fixed. Like I wish something like that existed when we were in, because like the black mold that was in the bathrooms at Fort Dix, it was like that shit was just, oh, that's just the way it is. Suck it up.
Yeah, they were like, "Hey, don't worry about it. We hit you with something in the arm that's gonna take care of that mold."
Yeah. It was. It's like I think I had 11 anthrax shots. Over 5 years. It was like, why am I getting so many? It was like a 7-shot series, and then you had to get a booster every year. It was like, after 7 shots, you don't think I've had enough? You're gonna give me 4 more?
Yeah, 4 more, dude.
Mm-hmm.
I know. I haven't taken anything since then, dude. I was like, dude, anytime somebody says anything to me about anything, I'm like, yeah, I had enough. I got enough needles in me to last me a lifetime, but
I had a big red stamp on my my medical file. It said, pneumonia vaccine study. And I was like, the hell does that mean? And it took me 4 years and like waiting for like the research to be published from the people that were doing the study to understand what it was, because nobody down in Fort Leonard could tell me what the hell it was. I called all the medical, the hospital, the med units, like the training unit. No idea what that means. And it's like, apparently we signed something when we got down there, and they hit you with a shot, and you're a test subject.
that's crazy.
And it was wild too, because I got pneumonia, a couple weeks in, and like I was hallucinating so bad that like I had to leave the field exercise we were in for a night to go to the hospital because I was at like 103 fever. And then I remember putting, the ice chips in my mouth to go underneath the tongue, so that way, I could get the temperature down, so I could return to the field, so I wouldn't get recycled.
You're like, yeah, that didn't work.
Yeah, that vaccine's not working.
Try it on someone else.
Yeah,
That's
but
crazy.
it was just wild, all that, and like that, and just going through like the section where they get you, you have both sleeves up, and they're just hitting you with shots on both sides, and then they get you
That
with
was
that peanut butter shot at the end, the one right in the tuchus.
Oh my God. Yeah. They're like, yeah, by the way, just rub it in. It's fine. You're like, all right.
No, and it's like literally, you got the thing like the size of a softball, like, and you're like, why is this? Oh God!
I know.
And then every time you get an MRE after that, and like you're kneading the peanut butter, you're just thinking like, this is the type of thing that was put in my butt, like.
I know. The amount of stuff that they did, it's like, he's just a kid. Barely graduated high school. And that's why when people say, hey, man, fucked up things are happening, and this happened, and so died, I'm like, yeah. Yeah.
But the biggest thing is, is just, stay in contact with one another, guys, girls, the best thing that you can do is, is keep together, because in the end, when you get out, what you did in the service, nobody really gives a shit. No, the only people that care are ourselves. Be proud of what you did yourself. Be proud of your accomplishments and what you did. But you don't have to be bragging about it. Nobody owes you anything. If you went out, today and you got something for free, hopefully you tipped based on what it would have cost, not just, got your freebie and run, and don't be demanding shit from nobody, because it was a job at the end of the day, just like anybody else, man.
Mm-hmm.
No different than the person that built your house, or person that comes and fixes your sink. Just all people helping out so we can live in this crazy world.
Right, we're all humans at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Well, Chad, I'd like to thank you for coming on tonight.
Absolutely.
Last minute, I appreciate it.
Absolutely, anytime, brother. You call anytime you need. That goes for anybody.
And happy Veterans Day to all you folks out there. Appreciate anybody that's donned the uniform, signed the contract, taking the oath. Like, whether you gone overseas, whether you stayed stateside, your mission was determined by your unit, what you did. It doesn't make a difference to me. You served. I cannot stand the fight over gatekeeping veteran status. You served, you earned.
Amen.
And but yeah, thanks for joining us. We'll be back on Thursday night for War. We Are Resilient. Myself and Travis will be on Thursday night. And thank you, Chad. If you just stand by, we'll be in the green room in the back in a minute.
All right, brother.